Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual public meeting for Amherst Avenue Bikeway. My name is Angel Chang. I'm the project manager. I know we should start. We said that we would start at 6:30. Let's just give a little bit of time for others who might be joining a little bit late, and we will get started at 6:35. Thanks for your patience. All right. Good evening again, everyone. Welcome to the Amherst Avenue Bikeway public virtual meeting. My name is Angel Chang. I'm the project manager for this project. Before we get started on the presentation, just a couple of things that I want to mention. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on the project website after the meeting along with the presentation. And if you do not wish to have your voice or likeness recorded, please keep your camera off and then refrain from asking questions using the audio option. Instead, you can send your questions via the chat option. Everyone is on mute. By default. You can't unmute. You cannot unmute yourself, and we will unmute you during the Q&A time, followed by the presentation. And to request to speak during that time, you can just raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Once we unmute you, you can click the button to unmute yourself. Cameras is off by default to ensure adequate bandwidth for this meeting. And we request that you please keep your camera off during the meeting as well. Again, you can use the chat or the Q&A box to send us your questions or your comments throughout during this meeting. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on this meeting tonight, and we'll go ahead and get started. So again, this is a virtual public meeting for Amherst Avenue Bikeway. My name is Angel Chang. I am the project manager for this project from MCDOT. Next slide, please. So just brief agenda for about what we're going to talk about and go through tonight. We're going to talk about the project background, go through the existing conditions, and present on the proposed conditions along with the typical sections. And then we'll talk a little bit about the project schedule. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A time. So project background. The project limit for the Amherst Avenue Bikeway is from Wyndham Lane on the south end, all the way to Arcola Avenue to the north. As you can see on this map here, it's going to be along Amherst Avenue. Next slide. Amherst Avenue, this project is part of the Montgomery County Bikeway Master Plan. And as you can see, this is the Widen area for the bicycle network that has been proposed in the Bicycle Master Plan. And the blue highlighted area indicates where our project is. And as planned, recommended in the Bikeway Master Plan, it is our proposed improvement for this project is a separated bike lane on Amherst Avenue. And so this project is also recommended in the Widen CBD and vicinity sector plan to improve cyclist safety and connectivity, which is by including bike lanes along Amherst Avenue. And this project will provide key connection to Sligo Creek Trail from the Widen CBD area. It will also accommodate a long distance bicycle connection from the southern and the northern terminus of the Central Business District. This project was endorsed by the Montgomery County Council Transportation and Environment Committee, the T&E Committee, in 2021. We were tasked to progress alternative 3B, which is a two-way cycle track with widening on the southbound lane, along the southbound lane of Amherst Avenue. We are also evaluating several options on the block between Pritchard Road and Reedy Drive. And now I'll turn it over to our consultant, Steve Zender from Stantec, who will talk a little bit more about the existing condition and the proposed conditions.
Okay, here we go. Thanks, Angel. Again, my name is Steve Zender with Stantec, and we are the county's design consultant for the project. Just going to pick up here with the existing conditions. For the corridor, the roadway width is typically 48 feet, except for the blocks between Pritchard and Reedy, which is 40 feet wide, and between Blue Ridge to Arcola, which is 36 feet. That's curb to curb width. There are two travel lanes, parking lanes on both sides, and sidewalks on both sides for the entirety of the corridor. We do have a ride-on bus routes that operate along Amherst from Reedy Drive to Arcola Avenue. And there are existing overhead utilities for the most part throughout the corridor that alternate between the east and west sides of the street. Parking on the west side is either metered, unrestricted, or signed for no parking in the southern part of the project area. Parking on the east side is generally metered or residential permit parking. The sidewalks, as I said, run the full length of the corridor and typically 4-foot width. In some areas a little bit wider, especially down near the University Avenue or University Boulevard intersection. We also have 2 signalized intersections in the project area, one being at University Boulevard, which is a state road, and then the other being at Arcola Avenue, at the northern end of the project. And then all other intersections are stop controlled. Traffic volumes for the corridor, we took measurements in 2018. Average daily traffic volumes range from about 5,300 vehicles to 6,800 vehicles per day. Bicycle volumes were measured at 1 to 2 per hour. Really the heart of the project is at University Boulevard. It's the busiest intersection. We've got a 6-lane arterial roadway with University. And we've got turn lanes on all approaches. So this intersection is one of the more challenging parts of the project that we're currently looking at. So for proposed conditions, as Angel mentioned earlier, we are progressing alternative 2B. 3 alternatives were developed for the entire corridor in 2019, and 3B was selected and endorsed by the council, and we're currently in between the 30% and 65% design phases. As Angel mentioned, it is alternative 3B is a separated 2-way cycle track on the west side of Amherst Avenue. And the alternative includes widening from Blue Ridge to Arcola and potential for widening on the block between Pritchard and Reedy, depending on a couple different options that we're currently evaluating. To address conflicts between bus stops and the cycle track, we're proposing to install floating bus stops at several locations. The example that you see here is located on 2nd Avenue in Silver Spring and represents the current practice that the county uses. You can see that the bus stop platform is located between the travel lane and the cycle track, hence the term floating bus stop. Floating bus stops are also designed to accommodate accessibility needs for those with visual impairment. This is just a kind of an overview of the difference between existing and proposed conditions for parking in the corridor. Existing parking numbers are shown on the left, and you can see it's broken down into metered parking, unrestricted parking, and residential permit parking. The numbers on the right are proposed, and you can see the numbers highlighted in red represent the reduction in parking from block to block. So you can see that there's different options for the Pritchard to Reedy block, and then on some of these other blocks, there's a little change to metered parking and not much change to the rest. I mentioned the University Boulevard intersection earlier. One thing I just wanted to point out is the dedicated exclusive turns that we would be proposing at this intersection. Basically, what that means is that any vehicular movements across the cycle track would be signalized, so that the cycle track would essentially have its own phase and wouldn't have to be concerned with a vehicle turning right or left across the cycle track while the bicyclists have a green signal. For the entire length of the corridor, there would also be a buffer and a concrete barrier which will provide separation between the roadway and the cycle track. This prevents vehicles from encroaching or parking within the bikeway. It adds a higher level of safety and a better quality experience for bicyclists. There will be gaps in the barrier driveways and for drainage, and the barrier height would be roughly the height of a curb, which is about 6 inches. And then anywhere we have a conflict with an intersection or driveway, we would be installing the green paint to mark conflict zones. And this is a fairly common practice. I'm sure everybody's seen these markings pop up around the county in the past few years. And then projects with roadway widening typically generate stormwater management requirements. This project also has an existing stormwater management facility at the southwest corner of Amherst and Elkin, which would be impacted by the new cycle track. So we are proposing 3 new facilities, 2 of them being located at the intersection of Amherst and Arcola on the southwest and southeast corners. You can see here, this is north is kind of going to the right, but you can see this is Arcola and this is Amherst, and these are 2 bioretention facilities. And then the 3rd facility would be further south, closer to the Elkin intersection on the east side of the street. We would propose a bioswale between the existing sidewalk and curb along, I guess, north of the southeast corner of Amherst and Elkin. So now I'm just going to run through some of the typical sections. We're going to start from the south end and then work our way north. So for this first segment from Wyndham Lane to Pritchard Road would be the first segment we'll take a look at. On the top, you'll see we have the existing conditions, and pretty much with all of these slides, you'll see the existing conditions on the top and the proposed conditions on the bottom. So for this particular segment, you can see that the curb lines really stay. I'm going to use my laser pointer here. You can see that the curb lines really stay where they are today. There's no widening, and really the only change is a redistribution of the width, of how the width in the roadway is being used. So we go from having the parking on both sides and the 16-foot wide travel lanes on both sides to having the cycle track, the buffer, and then we keep the parking, and we really just reduce the travel lane widths to make it possible to include the 2-way cycle track. So, and then as we move further north, for the segment from Pritchard to Reedy, we have a more challenging design. For that reason, we've developed 4 options to present to your community and solicit your feedback. 2 weeks ago, we did meet with the community members that live on this block and receive their feedback. And hopefully many of you are here on tonight's call as well. For the benefit of everyone within the project area, we will go ahead and present these same options tonight on the next few slides. So this is a summary of the 4 options. Options 1 through 3 do not involve roadway widening, but redistribute the lane configuration. And then option 4 includes widening to the west side of the roadway. Let's hold on that slide for a minute so everybody can kind of read through these. It's a lot of text. Okay, we'll move ahead. So for option 1, essentially what we're looking at is keeping the, you can see the existing condition. We have parking on both sides and the 2-way travel. Again, we would be holding the existing curb lines and then keeping the residential permit parking on the east side of the street, and the parking on the west side of the street, which is metered, would be impacted, and we would keep the 2-way travel and implement the cycle track on the west side of the street. Vehicles that currently use the parking meters in this block would need to use on-street meters on the blocks to the north, or park in the county parking garage, which is also located 1 block to the north. For option 2, very similar, except that basically we would propose to keep the parking on the west side of the street, the metered parking, and the parking on the east side of the street would be impacted. The permit parking on the east side would be impacted. And so the permit parking, vehicles that use permit parking would need to utilize permit parking on other blocks close to the project area. For option 3, we're actually proposing to keep parking on both sides of the street and divert northbound traffic. So we would keep the southbound travel lane and divert northbound traffic that would sort of be distributed throughout the area. And we'll kind of cover that on the next few slides. So we performed a traffic study to determine how this would affect travel patterns in the area. And the results indicate a total of 128 diverted vehicles. You can see right here, 128 vehicles diverted in the AM and 227 diverted vehicles in the PM peak hour, which is considered a minimal impact by traffic standards. Here's just a map that sort of helps you visualize the routes that the diverted traffic would take. The largest increase, as shown on the previous slide, would be the additional 168 vehicles during the busiest time of the day on Bucknell Drive, which is the rough equivalent of about an additional 3 vehicles per minute. So moving to option 4, this is, as I mentioned earlier, the option that would include widening to the west side. This option would allow us essentially to keep parking on both sides of the street, keep two-way travel, implement the two-way cycle track, and then we would shift the sidewalk and the buffer further west here. This would have some impacts to utility poles, meters, and some existing light poles as well. Moving to the next segment, Amherst Avenue from Reedy to south of University Boulevard. This segment here that you can see on the screen. Really, we would be similar to the first segment that we showed you, the south segment. We just have we have more roadway width to work with here, so we would be reducing the through lane widths to implement the two-way cycle track, and we would be able to keep the parking on both sides of the street. We do have metered parking on this block as well, and the meters would still remain on the sidewalk here, and parked vehicles would just have to cross the cycle track to feed the meters. The next segment is just the University Boulevard intersection, which I talked a little bit about earlier. This is kind of easier to depict in a plan view. Work at this intersection would include reconstruction of the traffic signal, would include drainage improvements, protected bikeway improvements. And by that, I mean, we would sort of shift the bikeway a little bit away from the intersection to allow a little bit of a deflection, a little bit of space for turning vehicles. It just provides a better level of protection for cyclists. Even though these movements would be signalized, so that we wouldn't have a conflict between a turning vehicle and a bicyclist. We would have roadway widening and a partial right-of-way acquisition on the northwest corner, which is represented by this red line. And this property is a gas station. And as I said, that dedicated turn lanes that you see here these are here today. These are also in the existing condition. These are turn lanes as well, but the signal phasing would just be slightly different. The next segment, I'm sorry, this is just a typical section. This represents the lane configuration on the north side of the intersection there, just north of University Boulevard. For the next segment, heading north from University Boulevard to Blue Ridge Road, would be similar to the block between Reedy and University. The metered parking would once again be shifted towards the center of the road, and the two-way cycle track would be installed in that space that's made available by reducing the through lane width. And then on the last segment, from Blue Ridge to Arcola, is another segment where the existing condition is only 36 feet wide, so we would propose to widen on this block. There are relatively fewer impacts, so we're really only considering the one option on this on these two blocks. Basically, the sidewalk would be shifted, and there would be several trees that are impacted by the widening. This slide represents or presents rather the anticipated impacts for the project overall. It'll be this slide and the next slide. There really are no impacts from Wyndham to Pritchard. You can see that the impacts kind of vary depending on the option that's selected for Pritchard to Reedy. And then from Reedy to University, we have a few isolated impacts as well, a few utility poles, a couple parking spaces, some trees. And then the blocks from University to Blue Ridge, same thing, few impacts, but not as extensive. Blue Ridge to Elkin, we have a utility pole, a few trees that are impacted. And then Elkin to Arcola, same thing, we have a few utility poles and several street trees that would be impacted. Estimated cost for the project varies, again, depending on the option selected from Pritchard to Reedy, looking somewhere from 2.1 to 2.5 million. So with that, I will turn it back to Angel.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about this project schedule, and we'll open up for Q&A after this. So currently we are, like Steve said, we're in between 30% to 65% design, and we're anticipated to reach 65% design by the end of summer based on community feedback. And we'll be collecting community feedback through July 31st. So if you have any written comments that you would like to share with us, please do so. And we will continue to collect feedback throughout the project, but the earlier you can get those to us, the better. And after 65% design, we will submit this project for mandatory referral with the county planning board. And at that point, the county planning board will review this project based on how, whether the proposed project and improvement is consistent with the master plans that has been in place for this area, as well as other county design standard and goals that we have set. And then by around winter 2023, or early in the year of 2023, we should be reaching 90% design, and we hope to beginning with the construction in the fall of 2023 with the utility relocation. So this is just a rough project schedule that we have set in mind. And so next slide, I think that's the end of the presentation. And now we will take a question and answer from the audience. If you would like to ask questions or have comments that you would like to make, please raise your hand and we'll call you and you can unmute yourself. Anyone would like to speak? Oh, right here. We have John Helms.
Hi, this is John Helms. I'm actually a resident on Amherst. I actually live right between Arcola and Elkin, so that would be like the most impacted area for me. I guess one of the questions I do have is in terms of traffic. I think that's my big concern with encouraging more bikers along that road. I guess, are there going to be any safety measures taken to improve traffic enforcement in that area? Because quite frankly, people drive pretty aggressively around Amherst. And I've lived in the area for 7 years, all around Widen. It's just generally, like, I think if we're going to have more bikers and we're going to go through with this plan, there just needs to be a plan in place for, safer traffic conditions. Because even if you put in this bike path, I mean, look at University. University is an extremely dangerous intersection. I'm glad you guys have plans to make it better. But I am concerned about like people turning left without a left traffic signal. And quite frankly, I mean, I guess it's just, can you just go into some detail about how you make University safer? I think that's my first question. I do have a couple more, but I think that's my primary concern right now.
Sure. Steve, do you mind going back to the slide at the intersection of University. Yes, and I think your question is particularly about this intersection where we are proposing to reconstruct the signal completely, where we will add in a dedicated left turn signal for on Amherst, so that it will be safe for pedestrian and cyclists to cross University along Amherst. And the other thing that we are trying to do is reconstruct the curb ramps in this area to make it safer, and it makes where pedestrian can feel safer to cross on University. And what's your other questions?
My other question is just regards to the street between Elkin and Amherst. Actually, just more generally that whole row. I mean, one of the concerns that I have around this project is mainly around how you actually plan to preserve parking along that stretch, especially given, for me personally, it's going to affect guest parking and just me being able to park my car out front. But I think my bigger concern, quite honestly, is, if you look at the from University to Elkin, there's at least one or two apartment complexes along that stretch, along that stretch that basically would basically be impacted. Like I'm just wondering where those folks are going to park and how you've planned that out. And I guess maybe I'm just not seeing that from the diagrams here, and I apologize for the noise.
No problem. And Steve, if you don't mind, go to the slide where between Elkin and Arcola.
The typical section.
Yeah, the typical section.
And I apologize if the slide, for some reason, the slides are on some sort of a timer. I'm going to try to figure out why they keep advancing.
Oh, you passed it. Woo.
Sorry. We reached Arcola, which includes Elkin. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So the graphic on the bottom is the proposed condition for this project, where we are preserving parking on both sides of the street, and we recognize that it is important to maintain the parking. As you mentioned, there are residential neighborhood where there are a lot of apartments, and people utilize the street parking to park their car to go home. And so we recognize that, and we are keeping the parking on both sides, and so that people can continue to park on the street, and their guests can also continue to do so. And in order to achieve that, we are proposing widening to the west side in order to accommodate the proposed cycle track along with the buffer.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And that's fine. And I guess, I also emailed with some other questions, and I won't bring those up here, because if you guys could, maybe take time to respond to that after the fact, I think that's fine. I think one last question I do have, though, is, does the county have a larger plan, though, for improving just overall pedestrian, biker, and driving safety? In particular, I think around Widen, because I think if you're gonna implement this plan, I think overall safety intersection needs to be better. Like, I've seen people turning from the middle lane to turn right probably 2 or 3 times in the past 2 weeks. And it's just, I just think, like, we can put in all these bike lanes, but if you don't improve existing driver safety and safety infrastructure for pedestrians, bikers, and drivers, I'm just concerned that these infrastructural improvements may not be that fruitful. I guess, is there a broader plan for that sort of thing, like with traffic lights and infrastructure, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this project is actually part of the BIPA program for the Wheaton CBD area, which stands for Bicycle and Pedestrian Priority Areas. And so the county council has put in funding to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety in this area. And this project is one of the many projects that we're looking to implement to improve safety. And so and we're looking for other area within the Wheaton CBD to improve on bicycle and pedestrian safety. And so if there are any particular location or spot or intersection that you have concerns about, feel free to email those area to me, and we can take a closer look at it and forward those to also to our traffic division to make sure that there are things that we can do to improve those areas as well. So yeah, if you have any specific concern at other areas in the Wheaton area, feel free to email it to us.
Sure thing. Yeah, I sent an email, probably was a little bit strongly worded. I think some of my parking concerns are a little bit alleviated by this, but I still think, yeah, my overall concern, I think now is just generally, safety and just trying to figure out a way to, reduce the amount of aggressive driving that can inhibit stuff like this from being successful.
Noted. And one of the way that we are trying to achieve it with this project is to narrow down the traveling to 10.5 feet. And that way, along with parking cars that are parked on the side of the street, and really that limit how fast people can drive on this road. And we hope that that will help the situation. And also we are planning to lower the speed limit on Amherst to 25 miles per hour. So there are other things that we can also potentially do, and we can definitely evaluate those other options as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we have a couple of questions in the chat that I wanted to make sure we addressed.
Okay.
One of them is, will there be a separate signal for bikers like there are for cars and walk signals for pedestrians, especially closer to University Boulevard?
Gotcha. Steve, do you know the answer to this question?
Yeah, so go back to that slide. We had it up earlier. There we go. Yeah, so the signal at this intersection would look somewhat different. It would be reconstructed, and we would be putting in exclusive phasing. So what that means is basically this right turn lane and this left turn lane would have their own phases to turn across the cycle track. And while these cars are turning, the cycle track would be stopped. And then when the cycle track is going, there would be a bike signal facing both sides of the cycle track, and these vehicles would be stopped. For a good example of this, if you're curious, take a look at Silver Spring, the intersection of Colesville Road and Wayne Avenue, 2nd Avenue. We did a very similar project, very similar solution. Basically, it's a two-way cycle track, and it has its own exclusive phase to cross the street. So, and actually, technically by law, a bicycle is treated like a vehicle and cannot have a conflicting movement while it crosses. It cannot have a conflicting signalized movement while a bicycle is crossing the street in this kind of situation. So the answer is yes. At University.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Uma, you have other questions in the chat?
Yes, we have another one that says, please discuss sidewalk and pedestrian improvements, especially between Reedy and University. And then along with that, also, will this construction allow an opportunity to collaborate with the state for reconsideration of the university about bike lanes? I hope I got that question correctly.
Okay, so the first part of the question is regarding sidewalk along Amherst between Reedy and University, I believe. And so as part of this project, we are reconstructing the sidewalk if we're to impact it. So let's see, let me. Well, double check that I have that correct.
So Angel, I think the concern is that there's an existing ADA deficiency in that block. And we can take a look at that for certain in our final design. to improve any ADA deficiencies that we have along the corridor that may be outside of what we originally would think, but we can look at that. So if you know of any specific spots like that, that's great for us, and we can handle it, you know, by making it ADA compatible. So thanks for pointing that out.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, so please email me if you have a specific area that you have concerns about regarding the sidewalk reconstruction and ADA concerns. So, and then the second part of the question.
Is this an opportunity to coordinate with State Highway on their
Bike lane on University?
Experimental bike lanes along University we can taken out.
Yeah, so from what I understood with the state, that they have since removed the pilot bike lanes on University, and based on their study and the data collection that they have conducted, they have determined that it's not viable for them to have the bike lane on University. Now, if we can discuss with them for potential coordination in the future, but at this point, we don't since University Boulevard is a state control roadway, they have the ultimate say when it comes to putting bike lane on their road. So.
Angel, it looks like there was a question about why not expanding to the east side.
Yes, so east side as in, is it specific segment? Are we talking about Pritchard and Reedy? Or
Doesn't mention the segment, just
okay.
mentions the east side.
Yeah, so during earlier phase of this project, we have looked at various alternative for bicycle facilities on Amherst Avenue. And from that exercise, we have determined that it would be less impact if we widen towards the west side based on the number of utility poles that are currently out there on the east side of the street, as well as the number of driveways and properties impacts that potentially needed in order to construct the bike facility. So based on that alternative analysis, we have determined that widening towards the west side was the better option. Okay.
There's a question about when a decision about the segment between Pritchard and Amherst will be decided and who is making that decision.
Yes, so we hope to have that decision made by the end of the year. The decision ultimately is made by the county as a whole. Or Dan, maybe you can chime in a little bit on that one.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, MCDOT will make the decision on that. I think the next big touch point is the mandatory referral, which I believe is scheduled for the fall. Park and Planning runs the mandatory referral, and they will give us input on that, and then we will take their input as well as all of the input that we get from our previous meetings and this meeting, and make the most informed decision on that particular meeting.
Thank you, Dan. All right, let's see. Let's jump to attendees who have raised their hand. I'm sorry, raise their hand, and we'll go with Kirsten Young.
I guess I'm just wondering a couple things about, I live between Pritchard and Reedy, and have concerns about the change in property value if parking spaces go away. And also like really the need. I just remember they put this bike lane on portions of University Boulevard, and then all of a sudden it went away because it was a bad idea. Like, I just don't know that there's, can you share links about the data about why we need this bike lane anyway? Like there are bike trails nearby. I don't see that many bikers, and maybe there's an idea that there's going to be a whole bunch more bikers if there was a designated lane.
Yeah, absolutely. And so part of this project is really part of the bicycle network that is where the county is hoping to build within the Widen CBD, and we would want to provide facilities where people will feel comfortable biking instead of driving. As we know, as we all know, like traffic in this area is can be difficult to deal with at some certain time of day. And so we are trying to build out a bicycle network, and Amherst Avenue is one of the first one in the Widen CBD area. And you're correct that there are other bike trails in the area, but Amherst is one of the road that is closest to Georgia Avenue, where people can utilize to as a way to bike or walk to feel a bit more comfortable, as Georgia Avenue has quite a bit more traffic than Amherst, and we're looking to build out some other facility in the future as well, so that this facility will eventually connect it to some other bike route in the area to really make it more bicycle and pedestrian friendly for residents and community members here. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I mean, so I guess information about the data that you have, if there are links to
I guess what data are you specifically looking for, Kirsten?
I guess whatever data that makes it seem like it's worth spending $2 million to do this.
So there's no data on a forecast for bike ridership. There's just really not a model that's built to do that yet. As Angel indicated, and the graphic on the screen is showing this. This is part of a county-wide network that was part of the master plan. So all those colored lines that you see on that graphic are part of a network that would start to connect Wheaton to Silver Spring and over to Rockville and other destinations, so that biking would become a more viable alternative to driving, especially for shorter trips, and a viable alternative for people who aren't comfortable biking, just in travel lanes. We've heard from folks that say, they see cyclists riding in the street today, but not everyone's comfortable riding with traffic. So this would be a separated facility that would provide for greater comfort for all cycling levels. And as the network grows, we would expect to see more people, just like as the roadway network grew in the county, we saw more traffic. But there is no underlying bicycle forecast that says, we expect to see X bikers by a certain year.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Oops. I think
You want to go to more questions in the chat,
Yes.
Angel?
Sure.
A question here: instead of a separate cycle track, might it be possible to expand the width of the sidewalk to say 8 or 10 feet to have both pedestrians and cyclists use the sidewalk?
Yeah, and I think there are certain parts of Amherst where there is a wider sidewalk, and based on the pedestrian traffic in the area and potential cyclists, and we feel and the recommended bicycle facility based on the bicycle master plan, we have determined that it makes more sense to have a two-way cycle track on the road rather than mixing pedestrians with cyclists in the same space.
Would removed trees be replanted next to the sidewalk?
Yes, we will replant the trees wherever possible. And I think there is a rule that a tree policy that we have to abide whenever we are removing trees from proposed transportation improvement. And yes, we will replant trees.
It looks like there's a comment here about a preference for option one, but curious what feedback we've heard from the folks who live along Amherst regarding the options, specifically for the segment between Pritchard and Reedy.
Yes, so we are still collecting feedback from the folks that live there. We did a in-person outreach to them and just show them the options that we have come up with, specifically between Pritchard and Reedy. And you know, I think in general we're all torn in terms of which option to go with. And it seems like the consensus is to not go with option 4, where widening is required, as that option would have the greatest impact to the frontage of the homes there. And but we would love to also hear from everyone else who are on this call and also, you know, live in the area. So if you have any prefer option for that stretch, feel free to email it to me, or you can fill out the online comment form on the project website. There is a question for that specifically as well. So we would love to hear from you.
You want to, it looks like you got a couple of hands raised.
Okay,
Yeah.
we will go with the first one, which is Bridget.
Hi, thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to comment and for the detailed information about the different segments of the plan. I'm really pleased with the work that's been done. I have a multi-part question, and some of this will echo the comments I put in the chat. First is that this plan was begun pre-COVID, and I'm curious how the changes to workplaces and traffic and commuting and recreation have changed the planning since this was begun in, I believe it was 2019. My second comment is just again to really emphasize, and it sounds like you'll be paying attention to this, but the sidewalks along Amherst are terrible. And you know, there's multiple places where the parking meters and the utility poles literally make it unable for anybody in a wheelchair or with a stroller to pass. And so as these roads are redesigned, the sidewalks definitely need to be widened and need to be freed of obstructions in order to make our community accessible to everyone. And then finally, I will reiterate that, you know, I think it's amazing that Montgomery County is making this investment in bike infrastructure. I think it's very important. I also think the opportunity specifically along Amherst really does exist to take this to a next level because of Wheaton Regional Park, just a couple blocks to the north of where this will end at Arcola, because of the connections to Sligo Creek Parkway. And also because of, and I'm just going to say it again, the potential, which I think would be wasted, to reopen the conversation with the state about the bike lanes. It was not denied. They were not taken away because of engineering concerns. They did make travel safer. They were taken away because of community concerns about very minimal delays in traffic. And I think that we should use this opportunity to open that conversation again to build a recreational and commuting bike network for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll definitely take your comments and express that to our state counterparts as well regarding your last question. And your second question was regarding sidewalk. And like we mentioned before, you have like specific area. We'll definitely go back and take a look at all the sidewalk within the project limit and evaluate if there's any particular deficiencies or, you know, in terms of width or ADA accessibility. We'll take a look at that. And, you know, if there is any like specific spot that you would like us to take an even closer look, then feel free to email that to me. And I forgot the first question. I'm sorry.
How has COVID changed this plan? The planning started before COVID, and then we, still with us.
Yes, absolutely. And so that definitely had some changes to how everyone travel. And I think as a whole, currently traffic is more or less kind of back to where it was pre-COVID. And I believe, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have some data that we have collected after COVID recently that, kind of indicate, if there's a trend in terms of changes.
So our initial counts were taken before COVID. We have taken additional counts, and we use what's called streetlight data to get an understanding of, when we did the analysis for the block from Pritchard to Reedy, we were using more recent data to get an understanding of origin destination trips in the area. And then Robert Milstead, our senior traffic engineer, I know we've looked at a few, and Robert, you can weigh in here for me, but I know we've looked at a few situations where we took some counts and compared them to our older data, and we didn't see a noticeable difference. I know we did that in Silver
Correct.
Spring.
Yeah,
it was the same in this area.
the section of between Reedy and Pritchard, we had done some additional traffic counts this year in April, and the counts basically showed that the northbound was slightly higher than the counts in 2018. Southbound traffic was slightly behind the 2018 count. So it was kind of a mixed bag, but that may have just been a change from COVID.
Thank you for that information. I was just curious. I know a lot of commuting patterns did change, especially with the rise in telework. And that might also speak to the comments that a few people have made in the chat about potentially this being something that's more utility for recreation versus commuting. So thank you for answering that.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Do we have more questions from the chat?
Yes. Will the access off of Amherst at the BP station be affected?
I'm sorry, where?
The gas station?
Yes, so we will be working with the gas station to improve the access. I don't believe we're changing the access as much as improving the access. I think right now the access itself is pretty wide and unclear where the pedestrians should be and where cars should go. So we'll be working with the gas station to improve access for both cars and also like pedestrians and cyclists, and at that stretch fronting the gas station. All right. Other questions?
I think it looks like someone was seeking clarity on our schedule. Are we referencing calendar year or fiscal year?
Calendar year. I think John Helms raised his hand again. I'm gonna turn to him while we look through the chat and for questions. So, John.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, just a couple follow-ups, just based on the conversations. I do want to make a remark that I completely agree with the comment about accessibility, in particular at the intersection of Amherst and Reedy. If you look at the metro parking there in particular, because I've used that parking garage a lot in taking the metro to DC for work. It's, as a pedestrian alone, it's pretty cumbersome. So, but I can't imagine using a wheelchair or like a large stroller to get up and down that section of street. So I think that may have been what Bridget was referring to. I think there, I mean, I don't want to speak completely for her, but I think there may be others. So, I mean, that would definitely be a place where accessibility, you know, in my opinion, is an issue. One other thing I would say, there was a comment about mixing pedestrians and bikers, and I would have to wholeheartedly disagree with mixing the two as someone who used to bike to work, and someone who, you know, often walks where people like to bike. I find that as a pedestrian, bikers can be sometimes oppressive, and I just think it's better overall that you keep them separate. Otherwise, opinion about bikers and bike lanes is not going to improve in this community. I would highly recommend keeping them separate. The other question I have is, there was a question of data in terms of improvements. Have you guys done studies about where parallel efforts like this have taken place, where extensive bike networks have been built out? And if so, what was the net improvement from those? I know you can't gather data from the county because obviously it has to happen first. But what about other areas where this has happened before?
Yeah, and feel free to chime in, Corey. But as you might know, we are starting to build up a network more so in downtown Silver Spring, and we have installed bike counters in along our facilities to keep those data. And I think in general that we see an increase in bicyclists where there are a more built out network where people can get to where they would like to go. But Corey, do you have other things that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the first thing that came to mind. Is we do collect manual counts at various locations around the county, kind of pre and post, so that we can get a sense for this. As Angel indicated, as the network has grown, more so in Silver Spring and kind of Bethesda areas, we are seeing ridership pick up on those networks. You know, I think the district, you know, just on the, you know, just south of us is a perfect example where you see lots of cyclists traveling for a variety of reasons, for recreation, to go, you know, between sightseeing locations, to travel for work, to travel for business, to do deliveries. And as that network has definitely grown in the district, you're seeing more and more cyclists. So it does seem to be a case of, if you build it, they will come. You know, it's hard to say because we're really on the front of this. I mean, if you look at the past 10 years in the county, a lot has happened, but it's still a fairly broken network. So it's hard to get between a lot of places consistently via a facility.
And I would also like to add that Park and Planning put a lot of time and effort into Maryland National Park and Planning. That's who came up with a bicycle master plan, which was approved in 2018. They did a lot of the studies. They're the ones that were recommending, in this case, a separated bike facility that their goal, again, the goal is to, over a long period of time, you know, increase the bicycle network and increase opportunities for bicyclists of all ranges, right? And as areas like Wheaton become more dense and there's more people, there aren't going to be really more roads. So one of the ways to make you know, travel through the central business district a little bit easier is to provide you know, a bicycle network, and this goes a long way towards starting that.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Corey. John, you have other things to add?
No, that was it. I'm glad you guys are gathering data. I think that is a good, that's great. Yeah, I guess just my only concern to echo would just again be accessibility. I do think that was a very valid point. So just, yeah, if you have that in mind, in particular near the metro parking on Amherst, I think that's definitely a place of concern for me.
Noted. We'll definitely look into it more. All right.
Angel, so it looks like there's a question. I assume maybe this was spurred by the comment about the mandatory referral. It says, are these public meetings that others can attend? And I would say definitely the mandatory referral meetings are public. I don't know, I honestly don't know whether they're back in person yet, but I know that they take comments in both written and people can call in or attend the meetings. So they are public meetings and they do take comments and consider those as the planning board discusses them.
Yeah, prior to COVID, obviously they were open meetings. I think their goal is to get back to open meetings where public is allowed. I know that the planning board is all there in the same room now. And I think the hope is by September that they would have in person as well as virtual. That's one thing that's come out of the pandemic is that we've all become better at virtual meetings. So I think the goal would be to probably have a hybrid schedule in the fall where it'd be in person and virtual.
Yeah, and I just want to add that as we get closer to mandatory referral, we'll definitely update the project website and with a date and how you can sign up to speak as well. And so check on the project website regularly for more updates. Oh, I just saw a raised hand, and I'm gonna call on Andrew Kuister.
Yes. So I was just wanting to confirm. So on the section between Elkin and Arcola, is there a plan to maintain the existing on-street parking on both sides?
Yes.
Okay. And has there been any studies done to look at how the traffic's going to be impacted by these changes? Because I know the section between University and Arcola gets really busy. A lot of people, there's no right turn, there's no left turn on Georgia. So a lot of people end up going down our street in rush hour. And we already have enough trouble getting out of our driveway as is. So there's a concern that this could make things worse.
Yeah, totally understand that sentiment. We're not really changing the number of traveling through the area, and so we don't anticipate any sort of condition that would make the existing traffic worse than it is.
Okay.
Right. Thank you. Let's see. Do we have more questions from the chat?
Question about how will the traffic coming off of Cobble Hill onto Amherst be addressed with the bike lanes in place?
Okay. So the townhome at Cobble Hill. So so it will be treated just like any other driveway access where we'll add a green paint to indicate the potential conflict point, and but also I think depending on what option that we go with for this stretch, it might change a little bit. And I don't think we're changing the access in terms of the one-way. I know there's a one-way street on the existing Cobble Hill Terrace right now. But if we are to select option 3, which is the one-way conversion for Amherst in this particular stretch, then leaving Cobble Hill Terrace would only allow a right turn. We will convert it to a southbound only for this section. But if we are to choose the other options where where the traveling essentially will remain the same, then people can make left or right turn out of Cobble Hill as needed. Other questions from the chat? I'm sorry, there's a lot of things going on. I'm trying to scroll through it too.
Will all of Amherst be one way or just that one block segment?
We're only talking about this one block as in one of the options.
We have someone who raised their hand.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hi there. I just had one question that I had put into the chat, which I don't think was answered. I think somebody mentioned that you're looking into having the speed limit be 25 along this stretch. And I just wondered if there were any segments particularly that could qualify for the new 20 is plenty plan, just to further incent slower traffic and create more safety for all road users.
That's a good question. We don't have any specific segment that we are looking into lower it further down to 20, but we can definitely work with our traffic counterparts and explore that option.
Great, thank you.
All right.
I just had a question as it relates to the one-way section between Pritchard and Reedy. Relates to Cobble Hill Terrace, with the idea that I suspect ways will start converting people. I just wonder if there's impact on that the Cobble Hill Terrace as it relates to that section, if you're making it one way, or if that's part of the consideration at least.
Yes, so that's definitely part of consideration. And I think that was one of the feedback that we've heard during our meeting with the residents on that particular segment as well. And we are looking, we have done the analysis of how traffic might be diverting depending on if we convert it to a southbound only option. And I mean, the concern was that there is already existing cut-through traffic that is going through there, and we can explore some options, and when it comes to like signing and providing some of that help to the neighborhood as well, and see if there's anything that we can do to alleviate that concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A question about whether speed bumps or humps could be put in place.
Yes, so currently we're not considered speed bumps on Amherst. However, it could be something that we can explore. I don't know if there's a specific process that we have to go through for to propose a speed bump. Dan O'Connor, do you know that if we have a new process for?
No, but it's something we can speak with traffic about. There may be some considerations for emergency vehicles and things like that. So, but we can bring it up with our counterparts in traffic if that's an option to reduce speed on Amherst.
Thanks, Dan.
There's someone else looking for more detail about the plans around the gas station and whether it will have any effects on traffic.
Yeah, so we will post the presentation and as well as the graphics on the project website. So feel free to download them and take a closer look at it. But if we can go to the gas station, yes. Let's see. So as I mentioned before, we will work with the gas station to improve access for both vehicles and pedestrians to make sure that it's clear for everyone. I know it's a little confusing as it is right now, but yeah, that's something that we will continue to work on and refine on the design.
Angela, I just point out that these, it's not necessarily clear on this slide, but we are proposing to keep these driveways maintain access to these driveways. You can see the conflict paint here. So that would not change based on what we're currently proposing.
Thanks, Steve. All right, we have a couple hands up. We'll go with Diane.
Hi, did I unmute myself successfully?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I joined late, so I missed the options for Amherst between Pritchard and Reedy. But from the discussion that I'm hearing in the comments, and being very familiar with that street, there's no way you can widen the road there. It would be terrible for the homes and as pointed out in the chat, really devastating for the townhouses on Amherst. It's just not a good location to do that widening. Parking is a big problem there. The townhouses use the parking spots that are in front of the meters. And for the community, the people on Amherst have no other place to park. Most of them have a one-car driveway. I think some of them don't have any driveways and resort to the street. So if any of your options include, getting rid of the parking, I would be very, very opposed to that. And also as the president of the Civic Association for Wheaton Forest, which begins with the houses, the single family homes on Amherst, and continuing toward forward to University on one side and the park down the community there. I'm opposed to the one-way traffic because what that's going to do is funnel traffic into the narrow neighborhood streets. Like if I'm very familiar with Amherst between Reedy and Pritchard, I go up and down several times a day within that neighborhood. And if Amherst were blocked, that means I would be going down Bucknell, which is a much smaller, narrower street. And I would hate to think about massive traffic going up and down Bucknell Road because they can't go into Amherst. And if the choices are, going into heavy traffic on Georgia or going down to Bucknell, people are going to pick Bucknell. It's already difficult to reach Metro by car because if you want to go into like the Kiss 'em Ride or the handicap parking, the only way to access that is by Georgia going into Reedy. So if you start making Amherst one way, it's going to be very difficult to get in. It's already difficult to get in there. And then if, the whole stretch of Amherst isn't one way, just making that narrow block between Pritchard and Reedy one way, it's like, you're going to have a dumping of a whole bunch of traffic being diverted to one way or another. That's going to create a bottleneck. So I can't see that in any way improving the neighborhood or what you're trying to do with the bike lanes either. And, I've seen the school buses, go down Amherst. Where would they go? Would you be funneling them to the heavy traffic on Georgia Avenue? Or would you be diverting them to the narrow streets in Wheaton Forest? And I can also, someone in the chat had mentioned, I don't even see that many bikes, to be spending this much money and making so many changes for the residents. And I would just say, I'm up and down within the neighborhood at many different times. And it's really rare that I see bicycles there. I'd say most of the time it would be a weekend thing that people are on, a recreational ride that I might see a bicycle or two. But, if they're not there, I don't think that if you put all this in, it's going to create this huge, urgency for bicycling. Certainly not what it's going to, cost the people living in the community in inconvenience. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think we have someone else who also has their hand raised. So Gary.
Was I successful? Hey, there you go.
Yeah, we
Okay.
got it.
Couple quick things. Can we go back to that one slide, option 3, where you show the revised traffic pattern? You got a little error in it that kind of that kind of, okay, there you go. Now you show there that, now that's true. We do come up, I live on Amherst, okay, it's between Pritchard and Reedy. And there's another way into the townhouses because Cobble Hill is one way northbound. And I think you guys know that, but this drawing doesn't kind of say that. And that makes me nervous that you haven't studied enough. Also, when we come out of what's essentially a private drive, and I don't think the county controls Cobble Hill. I think the homeowners association, the townhome actually controls Cobble Hill. So you'd have to negotiate with us on that, which way you'd want to make that. I think I'm not on the board of the townhome association or anything, but it's a basic understanding there. And it's actually a quite dangerous left-hand turn to come out of that one where you indicate to go into. That left-hand turn is quite dangerous, okay? I've almost more than once been hit, and several other people I know, we've had one or two little incidents here. So that's a really tricky intersection that would be great to address in this project. And I'd like to address the other lady's comments a few moments ago. You are really playing with a very difficult situation here where it doesn't seem like many spaces you're affecting. And I heard the one gentleman early on go, oh yeah, you could just walk up to a block up to the garage up there. That's a lot more hassle than I think he realizes if he had to live with it. I hope you decide wisely and can keep the lines of communication open. I'm very nervous that you're not going to get this. If you ignite this with the Wheaton Forest people and us again on this parking issue, you might never get this project in because they're both groups that have money and could make a fuss. I know most of us on this side of the street in the townhomes want option 3. And I really appreciated when the lady said option 4 was bad for the townhomes, and she acknowledged that. That was wonderful. It was very nice to know that they do appreciate us and we appreciate them. But I got to tell you, I'm really nervous about this project for the amount of good it's going to do. I don't want to stand in the way of more bicycle traffic, but I got to share my nervousness. Thank you for your time. Okay.
Thank you for your comment. We really appreciate it. All right. Let me scroll the chats for more questions.
There's a question about how this project connects people to Sligo Creek Trail.
Trying to pull on that.
And I think at least what the bicycle master plan envisions is that there's a connection to Blue Ridge Avenue, and then folks would ride over via trail connections that exist to get over to Sligo Creek.
Yes, I think you're right. And also at the end, which is the Wyndham Lane, where I think a neighborhood greenway is proposed, where at the end of the terminus of this project on Amherst, that if cyclists ride south on Amherst to Wyndham Lane, and it can cross over to eventually connect to Sligo Creek as well.
Angel, I can help answer this as well. So the bikeway would run up and down Amherst. There's a connection that runs between Amherst and Bucknell, and then it's on street, and this would be a kind of a low traffic situation. So there's a connection here, and then you kind of make your way over to this connection at Arcola Local Park, and that gets you to Sligo Creek Trail. And then as you mentioned, there's other proposed connections, but in the future, right, along Arcola and Wyndham University, that would happen eventually under separate projects.
Okay. More question from the chat.
Why not stop the bike lane at Reedy instead of extending down to Pritchard and past?
Yeah, so I think we kind of answered that just with the previous question about how to connect to Cycle Creek. That's part of it, is to provide a connection from Arcola all the way down. But also there is a more extensive bicycle network through Forest Glen and eventually to downtown Silver Spring. So Amherst will be kind of like the first piece to the puzzle with our county bicycle network.
There's also a question about accessing the library via Arcola.
Library. Yeah, Arcola. Okay. So unfortunately, our project ends at Arcola, but we can look at further improvement that we can propose to provide better access to the library. Arcola.
Looks like the bicycle master plan calls for a side path on Arcola.
Okay. Yeah, and that would be a separate project. Okay.
We have someone who raised their hand.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so has there been any concerns expressed by the Wheaton Rescue Squad, because they go down between Arcola, and I know they use it as the main access road over to University Boulevard. Has there been any concerns from them that this bike path will impact their operations?
Not specifically, but we will coordinate with them. And as I mentioned before, the traveling is standard 10.5 feet wide as indicated in our complete street design guide for the county. And so we will further coordinate with the fire and rescue at the Arcola Avenue and make sure that they are aware of this project.
Okay. And just, I think you may have talked about it a little bit before, but so there is an expectation this will bring more bicycle riders in, because I hardly see any riders on the street now. Maybe some on the weekends, but not much other than that.
And no, I totally understand that. And we hope that it will. And
I mean, is there a decent, I mean, there's a lot of money involved here, 2.5 million. I mean, that's a lot of money for this project. I would hope that there's some good data that indicates that we're gonna that it's worth it.
And the number
bicycle master plan is a bicycle network through the whole county, and to implement it all would be, I don't know, hard to guess how much money and how long it would take. But yes, we have all indications whenever we do construct new bicycle facilities that they are in fact used.
Yeah, and these facilities are, as we mentioned before, are designed for people of all ages and all abilities, so that they will feel comfortable to bike on the road without having to mix with traffic or pedestrian in this particular case. So so yes, we're designing for and thinking that people will use it.
Okay. Will the parking up at the post office remain the same as it was, or just remain the same? I guess that side probably wouldn't be changed, but will that remain the same?
Yes. So on-street parking between University and all the way to Arcola will remain the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess I just wonder if it's possible to consider another option. The section between Pritchard and Reedy is certainly unique in this whole plan.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if it's not the longest block in the world, if there's just a section that doesn't have the designated lanes. To see if the other things, having the designated lanes up and down, the rest of Amherst having a lower speed limit or speed bumps, if that still provides some level of safety, even if it takes a break for a block, for all of the reasons that have been mentioned tonight. Property values, traffic, safety, all sorts of things. I'm just wondering if that could be thrown in there as an option, because I think each of the 4 options in that particular section cause a lot of concern for either side or both of Amherst.
Mhm. And fully noted. And you know, we are committed to improve on the bicycle facilities on Amherst. So we welcome if you have you know, any other ideas or comments in terms of how we can achieve that specifically for that block. We have mentioned before that we can consider speed bump to further lower traffic speed as well. But we have proposed the you know, two-way cycle track on the west side, and that is this project. So. And thank you for your comment. Okay, I think we have one more raised hand.
Hi there. Thank you again for unmuting me. This is Bridget Howe. I did want to just respond to the person who asked about demand and just say that, you know, when you build bike lanes, people do start to use them. That's just known. If you look at communities like Carmel, Indiana, which has invested heavily in a bikeway network that is very similar to what Montgomery County's plan is looking like, it has completely transformed their community. And I think we have the opportunity to do the same in our community. The other thing I wanted to add to that is that just in the time that the 2nd Avenue bike lanes and the bike network in downtown Silver Spring has been improved, there has been an increase in ridership. I don't know if you have numbers on those yet, but I believe there's a counter along 2nd Avenue. Is that showing an increase?
We have seen increases. I don't want to quote the specifics because I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we can pull those together and either send something out to the community or put something up on the project website.
Great, because anecdotally, I know just from walking around downtown Silver Spring, biking in downtown Silver Spring and driving, I see so many more people on bikes than I ever saw before those bike lanes were in. So I believe that this is a case of if you build it, they will come.
Thanks for your comment. All right. We have one
there's a question in the chat asking if homeowners and residents affected by the parking will be provided subsidized access to the parking lots.
Yeah. So if we choose to the option where parking is removed, then we will work with either side of the residents to relocate these spots, but we will we don't know exactly what we will do yet, but we have some ideas of what we can do. So once we have that decision, we will definitely work with homeowners and the residents on that stretch to work out an option and provide space area that they can and their visitors can park. So. Okay. We have a raised hand.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the presentation tonight and all the engaging chats that are going on with the fellow residents in the area. This isn't so much a question, but I just wanted to point out that although we're calling this bike lane plans, I think it'd be good for everybody to also think of this as just other modes of transit as well, there is a rapid rise in scooter use in the area. And I can say it's not fun sharing sidewalks with scooters. And I see a lot of scooters also in the streets with people that aren't wearing helmets. So I think the bike lanes will be useful for people riding scooters. And I will also just like to go on the record and ask you and your project team that if and when you need to relocate sidewalks or sidewalks are affected by road widening and whatnot, please don't make them the minimum ADA widths, because a lot of times these scooters are getting parked on the sidewalks and they're difficult to pass, especially for anybody with mobility issues. So please take that into consideration as you're adjusting our thoroughfares. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will take notes on that one. All right. I think we have some time for more questions in the chat. Let me scroll through them.
There's a question about are houses that don't have driveways allowed to build driveways? And the answer to that is, yeah, anybody can apply for a driveway permit through our Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services.
Thank you, Dan. Oh, I see a question. Will this chat transcript and Q&A also be part of the public record? The short answer is yes, but if you have, if you like to submit your own comments, please use the online comment form on the project website, as well as you can email it directly to me as well. And it's also on the screen right now that you can jot down the URL. But we'll save this chat and transcript of the Q&A for the record. But since there's we have so many people who is participating in the chat, it'll be much easier if you can send your comments directly to me or through the comment form. And we have a raised hand.
Hi, one more comment is just that bike lanes are proven to make roadways safer for all modalities. Protected bike lanes. They are safer for pedestrians, they are safer for bicyclists, scooter riders, but also for the drivers along the way. So anything that we can do to calm traffic, especially in Wheaton, which has terrible pedestrian infrastructure and bike infrastructure currently, is a benefit. So I'm very pro this this decision, this plan. I do agree that the block in question that's causing all of the concern should be looked at really closely, and a good solution, maybe not one of the four currently being discussed, needs to be brought up, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is something that our community needs.
Thank you for your comment. All right. Any more questions in the chat? All right, well, we'll stick around for a little bit longer. So if you have other questions, or if you have any other comments that you would like to make, feel free to raise your hand or use the chat function to ask them or make your comments. We'll keep this going for a little bit, but this is the end of the presentation for this project. But if you have any other questions that you thought of after tonight, feel free to email those to me, and we'll get the answer to you as soon as we can. But other than that, we really appreciate you taking the time to join our meeting tonight. We recognize that you could be doing other things taking your precious evening time to learn more about this project. So thank you so much for joining. Again, we'll stick around for a little bit longer. So if you have other questions or comments or concern, feel free to drop those in the chat, or you can raise your hand again. But otherwise, feel free to sign up if you need to, or continue on with your evening. Yes, I just saw one question pops up about materials. Yes, so this meeting is recorded and will be posted on the project website, along with the presentation that was presented tonight. We'll also upload the plan drawings display onto the website, as well as the typical section. So yes, thank you, Uma. The website is on the chat and also on the screen of the presentation. Oh, we have a question about costs, specifically pertaining to Pritchard and Reedy. Steve, do you have that number?
Give me a minute. I'll have to pull it up. I know we had it in the slides from the presentation 2 weeks ago. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Yep, thank you. In terms of maintenance, the county will take care of the maintenance of the roadway, and as well as the bike lane that will be put in.
I would add, Angel, that the maintenance cost for the bike lane is fairly low, given that bikes don't put as much stress on the pavement as cars do.
Yes. Oh, we
We have someone who raised their hand.
Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, since the meeting's officially over now, would you mind going through the options that were presented for the space between Pritchard and Reedy on Amherst?
Sure, give us a second.
Thank you.
Yep. Steve, you can pull out the cost, do the cost first, if you already have it.
Are you able to see that?
It's a little small. Oh,
So essentially, options 1 through 3 are all around the same. The widening option is quite a bit more expensive, and that isn't fully. There could be other considerations depending on how the utilities are dealt with.
And while you're at it, do you mind just go through the options?
Sure. Let me just go back to the presentation. I'll just start from. Okay, so this is the segment Pritchard to Reedy that we were talking about. This is kind of a quick summary of the 4 options. 1 through 3 do not involve roadway widening. but redistribute the lane configuration. Option 4 includes the widening to the west side of the road. Go to the next slide. So option 1, essentially, you can see that the main change would be relocation of the parking to a different block on the west side of the street. And the residential permit parking would remain on the east side of the street and would have the two-way traffic. There would not be any change to the curb lines with this option. Option 2 is very similar, except that the permit parking would be impacted on the right side. The metered parking would remain on the west side. Again, the curb lines don't change. There's no widening. Option 3 would maintain parking on both sides of the street, and we would keep the southbound travel lane, but divert the northbound traffic. And we have done a study to see how the diverted northbound traffic would be distributed throughout the neighborhood. What we found based on our study is that there's about 128 diverted vehicles in the AM peak hour, which would probably be around 8 o'clock or so, and then 227 vehicles diverted in the PM peak hour, which is probably around 5 o'clock. The peak hour being defined as the 60-minute period with the highest number of traffic. Usually the peak period is 6 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 6 p.m., something along those lines. By the standards that we typically evaluate traffic impacts, this would be considered fairly minimal. But just to kind of put it in perspective, we would be talking about that the highest amount of impact would be an additional 3 hour or three vehicles per minute on Bucknell. Probably the northbound side of Bucknell would see the most increase in traffic. You can see that these are the other routes that vehicles would take to get where they're going. And then option 4 is the widening option. We would hold the east curb line and widen to the west side of the street. There would be a shift in the existing sidewalk, an existing buffer. There would be some impacts to utilities and parking meters, and the pedestrian lighting on that block. And then there would also be some impacts to the green lawn space and trees that are located between the sidewalk and the front steps of the townhomes there. That's pretty much it.
Thanks, Steve. Diane, you have any questions regarding that?
Well, just one more comment about if you were to get rid of parking on either side of the street. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I don't see a service vehicle there, either for someone getting assistance from a plumber or someone moving, and by creating a no parking zone, would just make it untenable for the people living on both sides of Amherst Avenue. So it's just not an option to get rid of the parking there.
Noted. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for reviewing this. So I'm trying to think, southbound then would be going in the direction from Reedy Drive to Pritchard. Is that right?
Yes.
You'd make it one way in that direction. So someone coming up who's trying to reach the parking garage would have a hard time doing that. They'd either have to divert from Amherst and go onto the traffic in Georgia and come around, or else they'd have to go through our community, probably Reedy, and then Bucknell in order to reach the parking garage. It's none of these options are very good. You know, I hope you would be open to you know, some other suggestions. I'm a fan of, you know, lowering the speed limit. I don't know about speed bumps because that's an emergency, a snow emergency street. And I understand, you know, that that's a big issue when you try to have bumps put in about how that would impact emergency vehicles. And I imagine that wouldn't be too good for bicyclists either. But, you know, if reducing speed helps makes a difference, you know, that's a good alternative.
And those are, I think those are a great idea, and thank you for suggesting those. So we'll take a look at other options where, you know, to further lower speeds on the street, and hopefully we'll come up, we'll make a decision on, you know, what option we go with for Pritchard and Reedy, and communicate that with the community as, you know, throughout the process. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have Sean.
Yeah, hi. Two quick questions. One, it was great seeing a lot of people in the chat, but can you just maybe give me a ballpark number, how many people were here and attending the meeting? Because we can't tell in these webinar formats, and I just like to know the size of the room. But then also, I'm really curious, when these bike lanes go in, who's responsible for things like snow removal and whatnot? I mean, we don't get that majority of the year, but we do get it. So who clears that out so we can have things like bicycle commuting and whatnot to keep us out of the roadways?
Yeah, so the county will be responsible for clearing bike lanes.
Does it
in
happen?
the event of snow?
Does it happen at the same frequency as like when they do road plowing? I mean, it's a lot more manpower.
I would imagine whenever there's a snow removal on the street, they would also do the bike lane. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan or Corey.
Is that something that needs to be done with like snow blowers or something? Because if these are protected lanes, do they have smaller vehicles that can get in there to clear them out since it's not as wide as the road?
Yeah, the county is committed to clearing them, and then what they use is something like a smaller Bobcat or something like that to plow the bike lanes. So they have a specialized piece of equipment. As we get more of them, they get better at it.
Okay, thanks.
And I think the highest I saw was like about 30 participants. That probably includes 5 or 6 staff, so around 25 residents, I would say, were in the meeting. I don't know if anybody saw any higher than that.
Thank you.
I think that's about right, Dan. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat asking if Amherst adjacent streets whose parking and traffic volume will be affected receive literature about this project like the residents on Amherst.
Yes, so when we sent out the postcard about this project and tonight's meeting, we sent it out to the whole neighborhood in the surrounding area. So yes, they should have received the literature about this project as well as the residents on along Amherst.
And another question is, can the stretch of Pritchard and Reedy be skipped for bike lanes, perhaps widen sidewalks instead?
The short answer is no. But Corey, do you want to add a little bit more?
I mean, I guess the way I would think about this is if we built 2 streets and didn't connect them, it wouldn't work very well for cars. And so if we do the same thing for bicyclists, you know, it's leaving them stranded. And I get that we can do things to calm the traffic and try and get cars to go slower, but there's a fairly large contingent of the population that doesn't feel comfortable riding in any traffic. And so these are those facility types that are looking to get more riders out. You know, younger riders whose parents wouldn't be comfortable with them biking in a lane with traffic, older riders who aren't comfortable riding next to cars. This is what these types of facilities are about and what we're trying to achieve. And we definitely have heard the concerns. I mean, that's why we have spent the majority of the brain power on this project, on this one block segment, as we realize the challenges in trying to get all of the things accomplished. And we're trying to find, you know, a good balance.
Thanks, Corey. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Again, if you think of any other questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand to speak. And we'll stick around until 8:30. Other than that, you're free to go. We thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you have any questions about this project or you have any comments that you would like to share with us, feel free to email me or go through the public comments form on the website as indicated. It's also on the project website, so you can check out more updates as well as materials that were shared here tonight, the recording of this meeting, as well as the presentation and other materials that will be posted as well. When will the presentation be posted? So by the end of this week, it should be posted by the end of this week. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for things to get loaded onto the website, but definitely by the end of the week. I have another question that says, will there be any more public forums regarding this matter? Yes, we briefly talked about this earlier. The mandatory referral is one of the public forum that will allow the community and the residents to provide their comments directly to the planning board, who is the who also put together the bicycle master plan, as well as provide recommendations on this project. So that will be definitely a public forum that you can express your concern and also provide your comments. Again, we take your comments throughout the whole project, so feel free to email those to us, and we will read through every single one of them. So let's see. Will the community be notified when a decision is made? Yes, we will. We will notify you when a decision is made. All right. But 2 minutes. Last 2 minutes. All right. If we don't have any more questions or comments at this time, I would like to officially end tonight's meeting. Again, thank you so much for spending your night with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about this project and share your concern with us. And please feel free to email me or provide your comments through the various forum, and we'll get the answer to you and address your concern as much as we can. So thank you again. We appreciate you taking the time.
Yep. Thanks everybody for joining us.
I am going to end the meeting. Thank you and have a good night.
Night, everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Great jobs, guys.
Thank you. I'm trying to save the chat. So hold on.
Yeah, maybe if there's some way to like summarize it. I don't know if there's a way to download it and summarize like questions and answers or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just chat format. Sometimes it's hard to decipher.
Yeah, no, I think you had to take a lot of it out, but just, you know, the questions and
Yeah.
MCDOT responses.
Okay.
I saved the chat as well, Angel.
Okay. Perfect. I also save it just so that everyone has it.
Yeah, great job. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Have a good night.
Yeah,
good night.
have a great holiday weekend if we don't see you before then.
You as well.
All right. See you
Thank
guys.
you.